Hello and welcome to a special edition of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. I'm here today with our special guest, Sabrina Merchant of The Athletic. We're hoping to put a bit of a bow on the WNBA season, which ended last week with the Las Vegas Aces wrapping up their third championship in 4 seasons. And Sabrina, you work out of LA, but you were at the finals. Were there any particular takeaways you had from the finals from being there that you think maybe people like me didn't get from watching it from afar on our screens?
Yeah, I started doing some counting last week actually, and even though I live in LA, I think I've seen more Aces games in person over the last 3 years than I have Sparks games, just because of the proximity, one, but also the relative, interest in the Aces, the relative success of the Aces relative to the team in my local market, um, and Las Vegas is just, it's hard to explain to people who don't, like, go there on a regular basis that it just doesn't feel like a real place. It's a very strange way to watch basketball, in a city where, like, you're just on the Strip, and it doesn't feel like you're actually in the real world, just people there to throw around money, and you wake up at 9 a.m. and they're at the casino already, and you're going to a shoot around, and I can't really explain the experience of watching basketball in Las Vegas unless you've done it, but, it's happened quite a bit over the last few years, and it never gets any less weird, but whenever people talk about like bigger arenas and do the Aces maximize their capabilities by playing in an arena that only hosts 11,000 people at best, I just can't possibly divorce the experience of watching the Aces from being inside of a casino on the Las Vegas Strip, and I just don't want that to ever change. So I hope for their sake, that it just remains incredibly weird and all of the celebrities walking in and you go through an Aces game and it's just like Jim Gray is there and Mayweather and, like, Baron Davis, talking about getting Jim Gray on his podcast, and it's just, like, the strangest amalgamation of celebrities that you would ever imagine, like, in one room. But yeah, that's honestly, I don't mean to, like, limit the
No, that's
finals
fine.
to,
That's
like,
the sort of
the
stuff we need
the
from
outside
afar.
world.
Yeah.
Because, like, the basketball, I've listened to this pod all season, and you guys have talked about it, and frankly, like, this finals were a less interesting series, I would say, than the other ones earlier in the playoffs just because of this particular matchup between Vegas and Phoenix. It, worked out in Vegas's favor during the regular season, worked out in Vegas's favor during the postseason. Um, and yeah, I think that's kind of the fun thing about the finals is that, like, it actually has become this, like, cultural event that people wanna be a part of now, Like, a few years ago, it felt like it was just a WNBA thing, and now so many people are popping in that just wanna be a part of the experience, and it's kinda cool, right? Like, the WNBA is more of a cultural touchstone than it has been in recent years.
Well, I think we're seeing that with CBA negotiations, that because it's grown to that level, the players now are in a position to say, we're a cultural element. We're worth the kind of money that we're now asking for because franchises are worth 250 to $300 million. You're getting TV deals for over 2 billion. So yeah, they're willing to stand their ground and say, pay us this money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, there will be an absence felt if the WNBA misses games,
Mm.
and I don't think you could have said that in 2020 when the last CBA was being negotiated. But now with, the ratings, I think you look at the 2025 season ratings and they're like close to 80% of the viewership of what the NBA was getting on its regular season national TV games. Like the postseason represents a bigger gap, but like, that's a remarkable number of people watching WNBA games on national television. And you just can't write that off anymore, right? Like that's a significant portion of your viewership during the summer when it's a relative dead zone for men's sports. So I do hope that this results in something that like ownership and the league recognizes is a valuable property and they don't want to like stop the gravy train now and it's just starting to get
Mm.
going. But you definitely feel it, right? Like I said, I'm in LA and like I've always sort of like bemoaned that when for so long it's been like, oh, check out which NBA player was at this WNBA game, and it's like somebody who plays for the same organization, right? Like a Phoenix Suns player goes to a Mercury game, or like a Washington Wizards player goes to a Mystics game. And I've always bemoaned that like the Lakers do not show up at Sparks games, like it's just not cool enough for them to be there. But now, like even though the Lakers still don't show up, uh, everybody is in town at Sparks games, right? Like Paige Becker's got Shamar Moore to show up, and like Leslie Jones is a super fan of the Sparks, and like Kristen Press and Tobin Heath are regulars, and it's just it's a celebrity watch in the same way that Laker games have become, like a very LA thing, obviously. But like these are just sort of like individual things that even though the Sparks are not, playing winning basketball yet, and they're not uh, the same resonant force culturally like that the Lakers are because of various reasons, at least people want to be at their games, and that's I don't know, just little steps forward that have stuck out during this 2025 season.
Yeah, it's just like it's one of the like multiple little signs that the league is more popular, is
Mhm.
more part of the zeitgeist for the use of a horrible word. But
Right.
yeah, that this league matters. That in the past, like you said, in the last negotiations, the owners might well have been saving money if there was a lockout. If there were no games, then they wouldn't have had to open their arenas. They wouldn't have had to book dates, and they wouldn't necessarily have minded that much if there hadn't been a season, because that might have ultimately saved them money. Whereas now it's going to be costing everyone money because the
Mhm.
players won't get paid, the owners won't make money. Presumably, it depends exactly how the contract is signed, but presumably they don't get that any part of that $2.2 billion if
Exactly.
they don't have any games to put on TV. We're not going to have a load of replacement players filling these teams out to play the games if they don't get a CBA done and they don't manage to have anything to play. So yeah, it's I think everyone would quietly acknowledge that a lockout or a strike would be bad for everybody involved. But at this stage in the process, both sides have to kind of sound willing to go that far because it's a negotiation. You have to stand your ground and say we won't play or we won't sign unless we get what we think is fair for both sides.
Right, and I think the players have to posture that even more because they have
Yeah.
a lot more on the line here. But I mean, you mentioned replacement players. Like, I think the idea of replacement leagues at least benefits the players in this
Mm.
case. Like, I know the whole point of making the WNBA a one-stop shop, like the only place that they have to play during their years, is so that they don't have to go overseas, that they don't have to play in Athletes Unlimited and Unrivaled. But as long as those leagues exist, it at least provides them some sort of financial, you know, safe haven as when the WNBA is not paying them. And like, that matters quite a bit. I thought, a point that our mutual friend Kevin Pelton made last week about how, the owners put prioritization into the league and they unwittingly created Unrivaled through their insistence on prioritization. And now that might be the biggest, like, sticking point in their way because players can just say, hey, like, I'm willing to wait it out because I'm getting six figures from Unrivaled this offseason while we wait for you guys to come to a fair deal.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about it last week, and half jokingly, but sort of when does Unrivaled switch to being a 5-on-5 league rather
Right.
than 3-on-3, so that then they become like a more realistic direct competitor potentially to the
Hmm.
WNBA? Like if there's no CBA signed, what's to stop them organizing another season in June or July rather than just playing January to March? And then does that give the WNBA a little bit more of a kick to actually get some kind of deal done and give a bit more up? Because the whole point of this league existing to begin with, like back in the 90s when the ABL was trying to get started as well, was so that the NBA continued to control all of professional basketball in America.
Hmm.
They didn't want any kind of potential competitor to the NBA, whether it was men playing in it or women playing in it. So their best option was to own the process and own the WNBA side as well. So a competitor starting up and being realistic, whether it's women or men again, would be a problem for them. This was part of the point of the league existing to begin with.
Yeah, and I mean, if Unrivaled already has one-on-one and three-on-three, I see no reason why they can't just expand to five-on-five, even if it's just for a couple weeks at a time, right? Like, you
Yeah,
have your one-on-one tournament, and how about we have a five-on-five week, right?
and they're already playing some games in Philadelphia, so why not take it on tour a little bit more and spread it around the country? Yeah, I
Yep.
mean,
Already swiping a WNBA market before the WNBA can get there.
yeah, I mean, I imagine Dawn Staley will show up at a game or two, and they'll have the shots of the crowd as well, the same as in LA, and yeah,
A lot of
I mean,
important WNBA figures these days from Philadelphia, including the commissioner, Kathy Youngberg.
well, that's a nice, neat segue. You're helping me out there. I mean, do you think? she'll still be in a job in, say, 6 months' time?
I almost wonder if the players are doing a disservice by pinning so much of this on Kathy Engelbert and giving, like, the NBA a carrot to be like, "Hey, we'll get rid of Kathy, but that means we need a concession here or there." You know,
Yeah,
it's, I would hope that the framing was more, "We don't like Kathy because her poor leadership results in such and such problems for the league." Not that we don't like Kathy because she didn't call me when I got hurt or she didn't, like, express the proper sympathies or concerns at this particular thing. Like, I don't care that Kathy's a terrible person. She just needs to be good at her job. And I think it needs to be more focused on that, right? Like Kathy being bad at her job is why we care that she's a terrible person. Um, but yeah, I don't really see how she outlasts this, frankly. There's just so much animosity and uh it's just a bad look, I think, for the league when the players outright just don't care for the head of the league. Um, and as the league gets more and more popular, it's just more and more awkward, frankly. Like you have people like boo the commissioner all the time in other sports leagues and they make complaints. And obviously we're seeing a situation in baseball where like Bryce Harper is telling the commissioner to get the F out of their, locker room, or dugout, I guess, in baseball. But uh it just has never reached the level of, like, vitriol that I've heard for Kathy Engelbert. Like, speaking of being in person at the finals, I don't think the TV broadcast effectively conveyed how loud the booing was for Kathy. Like, I could not hear a word she was saying, and, like, it's not that difficult to piece through what she's saying, right? She's saying, like, "Let's present the WNBA championship trophy to Mark Davis," right, the owner of the Las Vegas Aces. Couldn't make out any of those words. Like, the moment the mic was handed to her, it was incessant booing. The moment the mic was handed to her to present Asia Wilson the Finals MVP trophy, couldn't hear a word she was saying. They booed her as she was exiting, and, like, a quicker exit than I would imagine Kathy usually makes in these situations. Usually you sit and you, like, hobnob with the players and the coaches and, like, this is a happy time, right? Everybody's celebrating the culmination of a season, and it was just like, "No, we gotta get Kathy out of here as soon as possible because this is getting uncomfortable." So
yeah.
yeah, a very long-winded way of answering your question. In 6 months' time after this deal is done, knock on wood, I do not think she will be in this job.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully the players are sensible enough that it doesn't stop them making a deal. Like,
Mhm.
I think that's the only thing that would see her get fired, like, imminently, almost like in like the next like in upcoming weeks or even the next month or two, is if the players said this is actually stopping us getting a deal done, that
Right.
we can't talk to this woman, so give us someone else to talk to. But yeah, I think we saw in possibly a quote from your publication that somebody said anonymously that use her to get the deal done and then kick her out the door because she can be the bad guy in negotiations, and then you start with someone
Right.
fresh after
Yeah.
that, because this is, by its nature, antagonistic to a certain extent, because you're on two sides trying to get what you want through on a piece of paper when you eventually sign the document. So there's always going to be disagreements to a certain level. And like you say, people often don't like the commissioner. Like NFL players don't like their commissioner, but he's in place because he's there to do a job for the owners and for the league,
Right.
not for the players. But I think part of Kathy's problem is we've started seeing quotes coming from owners and from GMs as well about not particularly liking the job that she's doing, or
Right.
feeling like they don't have a good line of communication. There are so many people now in pretty much every realm asking for more transparency from this league. They just want to know what's going on. So often it's, will you actually tell us what we want to know? We've heard this from fans for years on end now, that they want better communication about what the rules are, what the stats are, what every kind of number is, everything about this league, because it comes down to people like us to actually tell people what's going on because the league doesn't bother themselves. But the owners are saying, like, someone asked Mark Davis about the investigation into those additional payments, and he said, "I don't know what's going on. If you find out, can you tell me?" Which is a ridiculous situation to be in. That that no one on any level, whether you're media or a fan or a GM or an owner, actually feels like they know what's going on in the league. And we're not asking for complete transparency. You're never going to get that because some
Mhm.
things need to be kept secret to a certain level because that's the nature of a business. But there's never a feeling that they're trying to inform people. This league has always felt like they try to keep things secret, and it drives us all nuts at different levels. And yeah, that has to change at some point.
No, I'm glad that you, interpreted Mark Davis's comments the same way I did. I heard some people think that he was just being, like, deliberately glib and didn't wanna answer the question, but I interpreted it as, no, he legitimately has not heard from the league about the status of this investigation because there is no updating on the status of this investigation, or if there is, there just hasn't been any communication on that respect.
I mean, to move away from Kathy and more to the document, when and if would you predict we actually get a CBA done? When is the conclusion to this?
I mean, it's not gonna happen on October 31st. I can't
No.
imagine that it's gonna get done within 2 weeks of today when there is one issue they're still working on and so many other things to iron out beyond that. Um, you know, the last CBA had the extension that went through the end of the calendar year, and I think that seems like the right model to engage in here because as contentious as things have been, like, whether there's a lockout or not, you're gonna keep negotiating, so you might as well
Yeah.
negotiate with an extension rather than through a lockout. Uh, and my guess is that they get a 2-month extension through December 31st. Something gets announced either end of December or start of the new year, and the league assumes like a similar off-season timeline as it did in, I guess I shouldn't say similar to 2020 because obviously everything went amok in 2020, but
Mm.
the off-season gets to start, in January with draft lottery, expansion draft, and then free agency after that.
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to sort of tell people October 31st isn't this like deadline in terms of everything's going to collapse as soon as we hit it and then everything
Mhm,
gets really scary because we've literally never got a CBA done that early pretty much in the league's history. The last four, I went back and checked the dates and they all went to at least January. So, yeah, it's going that long won't be a massive issue because then they can still run pretty much a normal off season. But with the expansion teams coming in, that's
mhm.
what adds the sort of extra level to this off season that we've not had before. It's a I wonder if they kind of got pushed on those dates at one point because yeah, the organization of the whole sort of schedule for the league, it would have been good to not have expansion teams coming in the
Yeah,
year straight after they've had to come up with a new CBA. This would have been a good year to take the break that we're going to get
right.
next year
Mhm.
if if they could have managed to schedule it like that. But yeah, that's not how it worked out, unfortunately. But
Yeah, not how it
yeah,
worked out at all.
it's gonna get scary if we get to like February and there's still nothing signed, and especially if we're not getting any positive noises from anyone by that point,
Mhm.
because I think the reason everyone started to get scared is because of the rhetoric the players have said. They sound much more entrenched and willing to stand their ground, as they should, for what they're fighting for this time and with the leverage they've got this time. But yeah, the things we're hearing from players is different from what we've ever heard when we've been at this stage in the past, which I think is why it's felt different.
I have a question for you, Richard, actually, since you spend so much time in salary cap data, and obviously all of my salary knowledge comes from the Her Hoop Stats database. So thank you for that. But we've seen these numbers put out of a minimum salary of about $300,000 and a maximum salary of about 850,000 that the league has proposed. I'm wondering if you think that's realistic on either side.
It's so hard to tell because,
Mhm.
like I said, we don't. I mean, we obviously now have that one number for the main TV broadcast deal,
Right.
which is necessarily no mate sort of for each home date or anything like that.
Hmm.
It's hard to it's hard to tell exactly what's a realistic salary without the league then coming back 2 years later and saying, right, we're hemorrhaging money, we have to do something else, and otherwise the whole league's going under. Because I mean, everyone's always said the NBA props up the WNBA with how much sort of they've sort of kept it afloat over the years. That was always the sort of criticism thrown at the league. Like
Hmm.
if you can manage to make your own money and survive, then you can start whining about salaries. Whereas now it feels like the league is making its own money, and where are the totals? I mean, I'm sure this is one of the things the players are arguing about in the negotiations, that they want full knowledge of what the money is,
Right.
because when you start talking about a percentage of BRI, basketball related income, the first thing you have to define is what is BRI. Where does it come from? Who gets to take their money off the top before you then calculate the total? Because the ownership structure of the WNBA is so strange and so complicated that what is it? Say they agreed 40% goes to the players. What is it 40% of?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
the NBA used to own half the league, but then they sold 16% of the league to a load of people, some of whom are NBA owners and WNBA owners anyway. So they own different parts of the league at three different points. The ownership structure is such a mess that it is hard to know what a realistic number is, which is why sometimes I laugh when I see guys like Dave Berry being interviewed in recent weeks, because they throw out numbers as if they're known, and I end up saying maybe. I make a lot of statements with question marks because so much of this is still up in the air.
Yeah, the point that I will agree with Dave Barry most like strongly on is that I don't understand why revenue needs to go to all of the owners first. Like profit should go to all of the owners first before it goes to the players. I feel like the revenue should hit the players first, but um, that again is a question for these negotiations and how they're defining that basketball related income. You know, whether it's all merchandise sales, all ticket revenue, all media rights deals, you know, local TV deals. It's hard to say what exactly goes into that bucket versus, you know, what is not considered part of the pie that they're all fighting for.
And the TV deal is always kind of suspect because it's still part of the NBA deal. So
Mhm,
if like the three massive TV companies are just giving you a giant pot of money, it feels like the NBA are the ones saying that this sliver counts as the WNBA purchase. It's
mhm,
not anyone else. So you haven't had that independent process where the WNBA could have gone out and said, "Well, what would Apple give us if you were just bidding for the WNBA?" Where you could have actually seen whether the league was worth 400 million a year rather than
mhm.
200 million if it was on an open bidding. So I mean, that's another thing the players will be about, that you've defined this price. Why should we agree that this is what you're actually getting? If it's going into an NBA pot, you've decided that that's our part. Why, if our ratings are 80% of yours, why are we not getting zero point 0.8 of what the NBA is getting from this massive pot of money that's coming for the TV deal?
It's a great question. I I don't know how they came up with the TV number. It's something we've been trying to figure out for years. Obviously, the people who negotiated the deal are very clear that they think that this is a good value for the WNBA. Again, you look at like what Apple paid for MLS, a sport that like did similar regular season ratings to WNBA, and it seems like that's a number that the WNBA could have hit independently. But yeah, uh, there's just a lot of, questions at play that make that question that I asked you, unfortunately, a little unfair to ask, so my bad.
To go back to the original question, yeah, I mean, I think maybe the players at least get them up to like a headline for the story when you announce
Right.
is that players are going to
Seven
earn
figure
at least
max.
$1 million. I think they'll hit like seven digits to make that
Mhm,
nice big announcement that you can get it that far, even if it's an unrealistic number within the actual, like last time round when they said players can earn this,
yeah.
but it was completely ludicrous because you needed every possible bonus, every possible supermax cent, and then every team deal and league deal for marketing and merchandise and everything else to actually get to it. I think was it 500,000 last time was like
I wanna
the
say
high
Kathy said,
number
like,
they claimed.
700,000 that you could get to with, like, the player marketing agreements and all of the bonuses, Commissioner's Cup bonuses and all that. No one got there, but,
No,
if you, like, won MVP and won the finals and won the Commissioner's Cup and, like, got all the marketing money, I think you could get there.
yeah, and I mean, again, those are numbers that we tend not to know because they announce the marketing deals, but no one knows exact apart from if reporters manage to ferret it out
Mhm.
from their sources. No one knows what anyone's getting for those sort of deals either. So, yeah, I mean, I report a lot of numbers, but I'm reporting the base stuff that players get according to the salary books and what's
Mhm.
on like the exact amount that they cost according to the salary cap. It's not what players are making once you include marketing deals, once you include what Adidas or Nike are paying them, or
Right.
all sorts of other people. What Angel Reese is getting for walking down a runway for Victoria's Secret. You know, some of these players are making an awful lot of money off the court, which is another good part of the development of the game. That these players are personalities beyond the court at this point.
Well, as somebody who likes to play mock GM, I'm sure you're looking forward to more interesting exercises with salary, right? Like if the max goes to 1,000,000, you can't just max everybody anymore, right? Like there's got to be some more useful calculations. Like the last CBA actually made it a negotiation between like what a veteran got uh, in a normal salary versus a max salary, and I think there's going to be even more delineation this time around. Like you have to be a lot more careful with where you spend your money, which makes the job of a GM more interesting, makes it interesting that like WNBA front offices have actually expanded their personnel. So they're people who can think about salary and think about the data and how this all fits into, one coherent salary cap.
Yeah, no one's offered me a job yet, but my DMs are open if
Not
they
even
want to.
Toronto, it's part of the Commonwealth, man.
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, to me about stuff occasionally, but no one's offered to pay me on a consistent basis for my consulting work. But you never know; it might come at some point. But yeah, I mean, the like you say, the current CBA that's just ending did make things a little more interesting in terms of that sort of process. In that we got a little bit more of a middle class back
Mhm.
because before this one, it was you basically maxed the player out, or they were still on their rookie contract, or they were on a minimum. It There wasn't much in between. It was like 3 or 4 players across the entire league who bothered paying for anything in between. You just filled it out with min and max. Whereas under this agreement, they did create a little bit in the middle. Unfortunately, what they also ended up creating was a system where players started taking discounts to
Right.
make everything fit. And I think that's going to be one of the interesting elements once we increase salaries, because personally, I'd be much more reluctant to take a discount if you're asking me to take 300 grand off what I could be earning rather than 30 grand.
Yeah.
It's going to make a bigger difference whether sort of someone like Asia Wilson or Brianna Stewart is going to come in and say, right, the supermax is 1.5 million, pay it because
Yeah.
that's what I'm worth. Whether we now reach a point like in the NBA, like in the NFL, where players say, yeah, that keeping the books and balancing the roster is your job, and
Exactly.
most of the time the supermax players say, pay me the supermax. There are a few like quarterbacks sometimes, like Tom Brady took a little bit less with the Patriots to help them put the roster together. You see that with a few other quarterbacks as well, but most of them say, reset the market with me. I want what I'm
Mhm.
worth. Pay me 40, 45 million a year, and then you sort out the rest of the roster.
Yeah, like you're absolutely right. It's one thing for Asia Wilson to take $200,000 and the max is 245,000, and like she could take a $45,000 haircut again, but like taking a $250,000 haircut is very different than, the discount she's been giving Las Vegas for the first few years of her career.
And I mean that also means that things like the $100,000 bonus from the Las Vegas local tourist authority, whatever that company's called,
A 2-year
makes
deal that has technically expired.
that would make less of a difference,
Mhm.
because if they're giving a bonus that pales in comparison to the actual salaries, then people care less. It would be much less controversial. Same way that all of this stuff with Kawhi Leonard in the NBA, if they pissed about to get him an extra $50 on the side, no one's going to care. It's
Right.
because they're trying to negotiate their way around and pay him an extra God knows how many million that it
Yeah, I mean, that
becomes an
benefits the
issue that
league,
people
right?
give a damn
To
about.
insure yourself against bad actors if you're actually paying your players enough money. Like, I think about the effect of sports gambling a lot on WNBA players because,
Definitely.
like, if you can get an NBA two-way player to, you know, do illegal things during a game because you're incentivizing him off the side, like, you could easily incentivize a WNBA player because it's so much easier to make the money worth their while, right? And now with the bigger cap, um, larger individual salaries, I would imagine that becomes more difficult. I'm still wary of when the first sports gambling WNBA scandal hits, but I would hope that it is a little more challenging to incentivize a WNBA player, assuming they're making like 6 to 7 figures.
Yeah, I've absolutely been concerned about that for a lot of years, and the growth of gambling coming into the league only makes it more likely that someone says, "Well, if I'm making 70 grand a year, and
Mhm.
I know my career in this league might be 3 or 4 seasons at most, unless I'm a star, then why wouldn't I take 50 grand from a gambling company that's quietly saying, 'Can you score a couple less points tonight?'"
Right.
Because that has to be incredibly tempting in that situation. However much we all want to believe we're honest and we would protect the integrity of the game and all of that, at some point it becomes enough money that people have to think about it, or officials have to think about it, because I'm sure they're not being paid that much money to work WNBA games either. So again, it would be the end of your career if you get caught, but on some level, it's going to be tempting to some people unless they're well paid for what they're doing.
I'm really impressed we hit the bingo and got to officiating by the end of this because
We
yeah,
went
the
over
money
half an hour
WNBA
before we
referees
mentioned
make.
refs. We got there.
It has become a topic of conversation how much money WNBA referees make. Yeah, I didn't even consider that part of it. But obviously, considering what the NBA went through with Tim Donaghy, like there's obviously precedent for officials to be bought. And yeah, if you don't equalize the playing field there, and you don't see a pathway to getting promoted to be an NBA referee, then why not?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be part of CBA negotiations again that the NBA, the league are probably going to say, well, how many things do you want us to spend money on, and are you willing to let us take it out of your pocket in order to pay
Mhm,
for it? Things like charter flights are the more obvious element of that, but things like
mhm,
a review center where you speed up reviews to make video replays quicker that the NBA has, that would improve the product for the WNBA, but they all cost money. So at some
right.
point, the league says, are you willing to pay for some of this? Because otherwise, it comes out of our pocket, and then we're more concerned about how much we're paying you. So yeah,
And
that'll
if
be
you're not
part of the
willing to
talks too.
give the money away, then you probably just have to play more games to produce more inventory for the broadcast partners, and is that something that the players are willing to do?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I talk about this every year. I think the NBA plays way too many games. I think
Totally.
82 is
Too many.
far too many. And personally, over the recent years, I've lost interest a lot in the NBA because each individual game is so throwaway on a grand scale that I feel relatively little interest in watching them. I mean, I thought 44 was probably too many this year. And if they were going to add games, I would have loved to see them add playoff games rather than regular season games, because those are the ones that we all care about. Those are the ones that
Mhm.
have the greatest level of pressure and level of interest on them, and those are the exciting ones. That's what we care about. We don't want an extra 4 games in the middle of the season that don't really matter. When you can end the league at 40 rather than 44,
And
why
40 is
not?
such a nice round number too for calculating stats too. I like it.
And we've seen also that you can change the total number and it doesn't really matter. In that you can play fewer one year if you have other things on the schedule to worry about, like
Mhm.
when you've had an Olympics or a World Cup, which is going to be an issue next year, and everyone's okay with it. It might look a little bit weird when you're looking back at someone's career stats that they played 36 one year and 40 the next, and that isn't because of injury or whatever, but it doesn't really matter. Everyone's fine with it. But you can look up how many was the max if you need to see whether they actually missed any time that year, and yeah, everyone gets comfortable with the change in number pretty easily, and they really ought to be more willing to do that. Especially, I mean, we're going to see a World Cup next year in September, which is going to disrupt the season one way or another, assuming there is a season,
Right.
because
Well, there's
they're
an
either going
all-star
to
game at least, Richard,
they've
in all of
announced an All
Illinois.
Star game. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to take place. They can announce it all they like. If there's no season, I imagine there won't be an All Star game.
Mhm.
That'd be funny if there were no regular season games and they said, "Oh, we've announced an All Star game, so you've all got to show up for that." No, it doesn't matter. There's no regular season going on.
Might as well have an exhibition to celebrate the thing we're not having.
Yeah, you all have to show. You all have to take a break from this unrivaled special summer season and come and show up for our All Star game in Chicago. Yeah, I I don't think they would get a favorable response to that somehow, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the precedent of, like, being able to scale back games during international competition seasons, I hope that, like, holds up again because if the precedent now is we added more teams, we're gonna add more games, I just worry about how unwieldy this regular season is going to become, especially because they don't seem to be perfect like, totally interested in expanding the footprint of the season, like, it's still May to October, relatively speaking, and there's just so many games. It's too many, and, like, the last week of the regular season was there was one interesting game basically between Golden State and Seattle that decided the playoff spot, but you had, like, Phoenix resting and Las Vegas resting and Minnesota resting players, and it's just, do we really need all of these extra games when it's just standings manipulation at the end of it? I don't think it's
And
necessary. I thought 40 was a good number, like, it added a certain level of import to every game.
And with more teams, we're only going to get more of those meaningless games at the end of the season as well. With 15 teams to move about, with more teams, unless they change the playoff format, we're going to have 7 teams missing the playoffs next season.
Mhm,
I mean, I will not be
totally.
surprised if they extend it and we end up with some sort of play-in game and like the top 10 all get in or something like. With this league, I wouldn't be
It's a good
surprised if it's
format.
top 12 all get in. Yeah, I mean,
I can't complain. I do unironically enjoy the play-in on the NBA side,
well,
so
yeah,
if that
that
were to
that, that
happen,
has
I
kind of
wouldn't be
worked.
totally
To be
opposed
fair,
to it.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I actually liked when we had the sort of weird
The
like
single elimination.
stratified playoffs because
Mhm.
that meant that teams cared more about where they finished in the standings because
Right.
it actually had a material difference to whether you got a bye or a double bye or whatever, rather than just okay, we're going to be at home in the first round to Indiana rather than at home in the first round to Seattle.
Yeah, there's only, like, 1 point of stratification now, whereas, like, being 6 versus 7 was a difference, between 4 and 5 was a difference, 2 versus 3 was a difference, right?
Yeah, I mean the one bit they needed to get rid of was that like a team that finished third could get eliminated in one game.
Right.
That needed to be removed, but the general idea of there being different levels to getting through different rounds, I quite liked. Yeah, I thought that made because then there's more point to the regular season. Part of my
Mhm.
problem with American sports is that the you destroy the point of the regular season, but you spend months and months and months playing hundreds of games for the regular season. But then the games that actually matter are the ones at the end. You're basically playing a 6 month preseason before the games that actually count at the end.
That's why it's
But
nice when, like, hockey has, like, a President's Cup or soccer has the Shield, although nobody seems
mhm.
to want the President's Cup in hockey because it seems to be a bad omen for actually winning the Stanley Cup. But yeah, I like the idea that there are multiple things of consequence during the regular season, which is why I'm a fan of the Commissioner's Cup, right? It just makes certain games actually
Basketball
count
does
again.
keep trying this. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, the NBA kind doesn't really seem to care that much about the NBA Cup. I mean, they've obviously been running it a few years now, but you would struggle to find a fan who can actually remember who won it in each year.
I
And
was, surprised, doing some research before this podcast who won it last year. I'd completely forgotten, and I watched all of it, so
yeah, I mean, you get fun coloured courts and all of that, but yeah, it hasn't quite caught on there. The Commissioner's Cup, I think, has caught on a little bit more on the W side than on the NBA, but still isn't really. People aren't raising banners and caring about it all that much. It's still a
they
very
are
much a
raising banners.
sideline.
They do exist.
Okay, but do the fans actually? They're not going to hold a parade, though. I feel like I'm right
No,
about
no,
that
no
one.
parades,
Yeah,
no parades, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
that's
yeah. Yeah, we were talking before about the about banners before we started recording, and my hatred of banners that say world champions rather than WNBA champions or NBA. I imagine, given that Las Vegas have won another trophy, we're going to be seeing another world champions banner being raised into the rafters.
Yeah, I am, entirely with you on this. Team Noah Lyles, you gotta compete against the world for it to be the world championships. There's a lot of honor in being a WNBA champion, and you should celebrate it as
Absolutely,
such.
yeah. I mean, it's going to be a multinational league
Mhm.
starting next season, but yeah, that still doesn't make you world champions. That still makes you WNBA champions, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't expect Las Vegas to change their plans there somehow. Um, One other element that we're going to see in the off season that I've seen you writing about just recently is at least 4 more teams still need head coaches, and Portland have just made an interesting hire with Alex
One of their
Sarama.
countrymen.
Yes, yeah, I noticed that when I watched the video of him running some of his system. Was that the accent? Yeah, was unusual for a basketball coach in the US. So yeah, good luck to him. It's an unusual hire in that he's not a traditional head coach. He's more on the player development side. He's
Mhm.
connected to this CLA system that there's been a lot of interest in writing about recently. Do you expect that? I mean, you wrote about. Do you know anything about him and expect him to work out well for the Fire?
I'd heard his name a lot during the process, and I think,
Mm.
his connection through, the London Lions, honestly, one of the great undertold stories of the last few years, the
I was
2023,
at
twenty
lots of the
twenty four
games. Yeah,
Euro Cup champion London Lions. He
I was
was,
at that one too. Yeah, Holly Winterburn, who you may eventually see in Atlanta making the winning shot. Yeah, we all went nuts.
yeah. I mostly associate, Carly Samuelson and Temi Fagbenle with that team, but yeah, Holly Winterburn, sure. She was signed to a contract before,
Yep,
being suspended this
got
season,
hurt
yeah?
unfortunately. Yeah,
Yeah. But anyway, he was in the front office for that team. I want to say had a fun title called the Director of Methodology, and the GM of the Portland Fire was the general manager of that team too. So, you know, in terms of how these hires are done, like having a previous connection seems to be a good indicator that you'll be in consideration when a job opens. So that is unsurprising. Um, I am a little concerned just about the mainly player development aspect, like immediately
yeah.
turning into a head coach. Like I think about Tyler Marsh, who was an excellent player development person, not only in the Las Vegas Aces, like Jackie Young obviously swears by him, but also at his previous NBA stops. And, maybe he'll be a good head coach soon enough, but it hasn't happened yet, right? And I don't know what Portland's runway is here, right? Are they content just to do what the normal expansion team does and like wait for the Juju Watkins lottery or the Sarah Strong lottery, or do they want to have more of a Golden State path? Um, I think hiring a player development coach kind of signals that they're okay with the traditional expansion path, and that's fine so long as you're willing to give your coach a runway. But there's historically, and like of late in the WNBA, there's just not a lot of runway, right? If you don't get results soon, you're not going to be in a job. So I think there just has to be alignment, between Vanya and Alex Rama and the ownership of the Portland Fire, because otherwise you're um, putting a lot of hope in somebody who just hasn't proven this yet.
No, that's an interesting point about the plan and what the pathway is because I think Golden State has changed sort of how a lot of people view
Mhm.
what an expansion team is capable of and what your expectations can be from the ground up because expansion teams aren't supposed to be as good as the Valkyries were,
Right.
but this is but people have short memories, so the most recent one is going to be the one that's in the forefront of minds, and people are going to, well, Golden State went 500 and made the playoffs and
And
filled the
their
arena
GM
every single
was an
night.
assistant GM in Golden State last year, so
Yep.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, Toronto and Portland, and then the other three teams that we still have coming are going to be put under that kind of microscope. And yeah, if they come out like a normal expansion team and win 6 games in their first season, yeah, that then the head coach might not be long for the world, unfortunately, in terms of
Personally,
sticking
I don't
around.
think there's anything wrong with winning 6 games in your debut season, so
No,
long as that is the goal going in?
yeah, and everyone involved is expecting that and doesn't have a problem with that being how it's played out because yeah,
Right,
that's what normally ends up being the disconnect and yeah, what gets people fired and like you say, ownership has to be on board as well because otherwise the GM feels like they're connected to the head coach and sometimes has to cling on to them because the two jobs are intertwined and you don't feel like you can make one person the culprit for what's happened. You
right.
all have to be on the same plan. Yeah, I mean, the one other item that I had on my notes before we started recording was what do you want to see in this CBA beyond the stuff that we were talking about earlier on? What should they be talking about once everyone agrees on the money and gets past that basic level of what's going on in the negotiations?
Well, as someone who's in my 30s and thinking about, my future quite a bit, a pension, I think, is something that they
Yeah,
should be focusing on.
we've heard that come
That
up definitely.
Yeah, that seems like a very important piece of business, especially because the current generation of WNBA players is going to be one that doesn't really benefit from the financial gains that are happening now, but put in the work to get the league to this point, and I think should be compensated for it at some point down the line. So yeah, that seems like a big deal. Um, we've talked about codifying charter flights, all of the extra money that the owners might have to put into officiating systems. Uh, I mean, I think there's so many like unknowns with salary structure. I feel like a soft salary cap would be beneficial at some point, but I don't think it's necessary right now. Just because you just need to get the numbers higher at this point. Like there's enough movement. I think that's a battle for another day to like make GM's jobs a little bit more fun with all of the exceptions and whatnot. Um, but yeah, for me, it's really pension. That's the number one thing. Yeah.
Do you think we're going to see a system where they let the billionaire owners spend more of their money to gain an advantage? Because that's always been part of the problem, or not problem, but part of the point
Mhm.
of the CBA in this league has been to keep things fair rather
Yeah.
than just to establish rules. They've always tried to balance it out so that you didn't have to be a super mega rich owner in order
Mhm.
to run a team, that you could survive without that and still be on a level playing field. But it feels like the billionaires are coming in now, and it may be that they want other people to keep up with them rather than bringing them down to the level of the slightly less rich owners.
Yeah, at least we're seeing, the billionaires throw money into like facilities and
Mm,
training staffs, which may not fund the players directly, but at least benefits them in a extremely tangible way, right? Like a place to work out, someone to stretch you out, massage therapists, physical therapists, like chefs to take care of your meals. All of those things, again, may not be direct paycheck, but they do get to the players pretty cleanly.
yeah.
That's nice that like the 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 owners who are unwilling to spend are sort of getting shamed into spending, which again, in Los Angeles feels like that's what's happening here. Uh,
Mm,
but I I think if they just tie the salary to the revenue, then at the very least the players will get to grow with the business, and then you don't have
yeah.
to worry about needing specific owners to give you money under the table. You can just benefit from what the tide that is lifting everybody else, right?
It does seem like the base element is that the players want their money tied to the growth of the league. And certainly from the numbers that you mentioned earlier that came through front office sports, it feels like the league is mostly just saying, let's kind of keep the system we've got and we'll put these higher numbers in instead. And I
Mhm.
don't think the players are going to consider that's enough. I think, like you say, they're going to want, because there was technically a revenue sharing system in the current CBA,
Right.
but it was set up so that it was never really going to trigger. And then COVID hit in 2020 as well,
And
which
it was
made it
really never gonna
virtually
trigger.
impossible to trigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe they start with that as an absolute base and then come up with something more sensible in terms of what's actually going to be a revenue sharing system, because otherwise you have to do what I've been suggesting for a long time, which is tear up the CBA and start with a blank sheet of paper, which they have not done basically since they wrote the first one. We've
Hmm.
basically got just people scribbling over the top and coming up with new sections when someone managed to find a loophole or a little problem or a rule that doesn't work, so you need a new rule. They come up with some little way to tweak it. And yeah, what you have to do at some point is say, this isn't working, we don't like this, and write it from scratch. But uh, that takes a lot of time and a lot of negotiation, and we're already a long way down the path. So I'm not sure whether either side is going to be willing to go to that point, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, that's it kinda sounds like that's what the players are trying to do is rip up some
Yeah.
sections, but it doesn't seem to have met a willing partner yet. So, we'll see if, deadlines spur some action here.
Yeah. It, yeah. We obviously have the one deadline of October 31st. I wonder if anyone will ever actually be honest about what the next true deadline is, because we need, what really spurs action in these negotiations is when there's, somebody thinks that something's going to break down. Like, we won't have a season if we go past
Right.
X. Then that actually feels like a proper deadline, and someone will sit down and get a piece of paper signed, because I was looking back at the previous ones. I found sort of people starting to worry about an actual lockout or a strike when negotiations went to April once. They're really going to want to avoid that this time,
Yeah,
because
you can't get an expansion draft
especially with
done
an
again.
expansion draft, yeah,
Yeah.
that that would be scarily late, and they'd have to change the whole format of the season, I think, at that point, because you'd need the expansion drafts and then training camps, and yeah, that you wouldn't be able
Maybe
to
you get
start
fewer
until.
games, Richard.
You might, but then they try and fit them all within 50 days. You'd end up playing a 40 game schedule in 55 days or something
Mhm.
insane like that. So, yeah, let's hope we don't get there, but you never know at this point.
Yeah, I think that's as good a place as any to stop.
So, with that, yeah, this has been the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Sabrina, do you want to tell people where they can see and hear all of your output?
Yeah, I am at The Athletic, so if you wanna read my written work, that's at theathletic.com, and then we have a twice weekly women's basketball podcast called No Off Season that drops on Tuesdays and Fridays, which you can watch
And
or listen to wherever, yeah.
yeah, I personally don't like that you can watch these podcasts. I would much rather have them just be audio, but they don't let me make those decisions, unfortunately. Um, you can come back and listen to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. We are still going to be every day of the week, although the coverage is going to be inevitably spinning more to the college game, which means you won't be hearing nearly as much from me. Some people will see that as a positive, some people as a negative. Um, on the newsletter, you can read my off-season guides have been coming out all this week and will be coming out next week as well. And stay tuned for more content from us and from Sabrina over at The Athletic. Thanks.